Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Lindsay, and I'm on staff with Magnified Giving. And today I'm joined by Latisha, Kristin, Jennifer, and Lindsay. And we're going to have a conversation today about equality and social justice. So I'm really excited to have each of these nonprofit representatives here today. And I'm just going to ask that they introduce themselves and share a little bit about their organizations and their missions, and specifically how their missions relate to equality and social justice. So, Latisha, could I ask you to kick us off?
Yes, hi, my name is Latisha Owens, and I am the founder and CEO of Guiding Light Mentoring. We are a youth organization dedicated to providing students with one-on-one mentorship. Our mission is to provide youth with support, encouragement, and guidance to help youth make positive decisions that lead to a successful life. So with our organization, we don't technically address hunger or poverty or gun violence, but with the mentors and the mentees meeting one-on-one, we do address some of those issues so that they can make those positive decisions if they're faced with that particular thing. So I might even think about education. So like a lot of our kids are on IEPs, which are educational plans. And so the school that they're attending may not be implementing their IEP and getting the students the interventions that they need. So as a mentor, we help the kid and the family to be able to advocate for themselves and know how to navigate the school system if they're having any issues with their education. So we may not necessarily address certain things, but specifically be geared towards that. But because there's different issues that kids may face, we do educate them on how to address those different things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Latisha. Jennifer, could I ask you to go next?
Sure. I'm Jennifer Milani, and I work for YWCA Greater Cincinnati. We are an affiliate of the YWCA USA, and one of the cool things about YWCAs is that we all share the same mission. And so our mission is that the YWCA is dedicated to eliminating racism, empowering women, promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And so it's sort of self-explanatory in our mission of how we relate to social justice and equality, because we're always fighting for women and girls to have, whether it's equal pay, whether it's equal access to services, to be free from domestic violence and sexual assault. We work with individuals who commit harm to their intimate partners to try to help them learn new skills so that they stop domestic violence. And in terms of racial justice, we're always working to try to help people who struggle in that area to be successful. You know, look at the differences and the disparities between students of color in terms of discipline rates in schools. You know, there's a huge gap in discipline rates between what happens for white students and what happens for Black students. And so part of our mission is really looking at that equality for everybody, whether it's based on race, immigrant status, whatever, and really trying to make the community a better place for all of our residents.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Lindsay, could I ask you to go next?
Yeah, definitely. I'm Lindsay Barge, and I'm the manager of sports and competition for Special Olympics Ohio for the Southwest region, specifically in Hamilton County. And so Special Olympics as an organization worldwide, we provide sports training and competition to children and adults with intellectual disabilities. So that is a cognitive disability. That is not necessarily a physical disability. And so, like I said, this is a year-round program. And so we offer over 18 different sports in Hamilton County. We also offer opportunities for health and wellness, for leadership, training for our athletes, and then just continuing their growth with physical fitness, demonstrating courage and making our athletes feel like they're respected and productive members of their communities. And how Special Olympics really ties into equality and social justice is we are really fighting for inclusion and fighting to promote that anybody with a disability, whether it is cognitive or a physical disability, is the exact same as everybody else. And we're doing that through sports and showing the world what our athletes can do on the field, which then translates to what they can do off the field.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Kristin?
Hi, Kristin Burgoyne. I'm the Executive Director for Refugee Connect, and our mission is to empower people who are forced to leave their country because of war, persecution, or natural disaster to thrive in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Really, our vision is to help refugees acclimate to a new culture once they are resettled here in Greater Cincinnati, and to create a more welcoming community for refugees. And we do that through several different types of programming. We have external facing programming, which is really engaging the larger community and learning about refugees and how they arrive in the US and kind of their journey, and then to offer people opportunities to volunteer and get to know their new neighbors. And then we also have programming that's directed towards the refugee community itself. So we actually hire community navigators, and they are representative of the populations that they serve. We currently have 7 navigators who speak 9 languages in addition to English, and they provide native language support for families, helping to identify needs that the refugee community is facing and the challenges that they're facing in their new environment, and then connecting them to all the resources that are available to them. So when we talk about social justice and equity with the refugee population, it's really ensuring that they are given the same level of access to the community resources and also service providers and benefits that everyone else is entitled to as well. And so we do a lot of education and training with service providers and community partners on culturally responsive, trauma-informed practices, so that when a refugee is engaged with an organization like YWCA, that the staff there know how to interact with that person, and that they're really taking into account cultural differences and how to engage in a culturally responsive way.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. I think this is cool because all of you kind of serve different populations and yet still kind of have this overarching part of your mission that relates to social justice and equality. So this is exciting. I think this is going to be really cool. I think it's just encouraging to see different examples of how you can be involved in this work and still have overlaps with other populations or things that for students, those of you who are watching, things that you're passionate about. So that's cool. Next, I'd love to ask, what is the value of work related to equality and social justice? What is this kind of work? What impact does it have on the community? I'd love to hear from you all on that topic. Anyone willing to kick us off?
Yeah, I
cool.
can.
Thank you.
So with Special Olympics, I think one of the big things is it might not seem like such a community impact if you look at the entire community, but with our athletes in specific, it's letting our athletes do typical things that everybody else can do, and that we don't even think twice about going to the gym, playing sports, trying something new. It gives our athletes a safe space to do these things. So that way, when they turn around and go back to their community, they are a more well-rounded individual. They feel more comfortable in their own skin. And it's also just showing them that, one of the big things we always talk about at Special Olympics is that you deserve to be in your community and nobody should tell you otherwise. And so sometimes when our athletes come to Special Olympics, they express to me that, they now feel like they're a part of a community, where when they go back, they don't. And so by doing those sports and then inviting their friends and their families and their community members to watch them and be incorporated in that process, it really starts to bring together and pull in different aspects of each person's community to start for that strive for inclusion and that one community, one heart type of perspective.
I think in general too, just generally being involved in social justice work and equity work is really powerful for communities because you are advocating for dismantling really racist institutionalized structures and rebuilding those so that they're more inclusive, which in turn, really helps your community to thrive. And so you're giving people the ability to reach their full potential. You're providing the resources and the support necessary for people to be able to navigate different systems. When I think of, some of the families that I work with that are refugees, they face a lot of barriers to integrating more successfully into the community, and it's usually, compounded by this challenge of not speaking the language, knowing the culture, maybe having a different faith than the dominant culture, and not understanding how to navigate all these really complex systems. And then they go into those institutions and they're faced with a lot of racism and prejudice, just immediately, sometimes because of the way they look. And so, I think being able to have organizations that are really focused on that population and helping people who are serving that population to learn how to better, offer services that are inclusive, it can only benefit the larger community, because ultimately what we want is for our families to be able to be engaged fully as citizens. And they cannot do that unless, these systems that they're working with are responding to their needs and able to help them.
Yeah, I think similar to what Kristin was saying, that, we work a lot with domestic violence survivors, and we know that domestic violence victims as workers and as contributors to the community can be limited, but they can be limited in their movement. If their abuser is showing up on their job, they're missing work, they're missing hours. So the more we can work with them to live violence-free lives, the more productive they're going to be. So from that sense, the community benefits from our work with domestic violence, our work with the people who are causing the harm to begin with. The goal there obviously is to make it a safer community for families. We want to make sure that our immigrants that we're working with are aware of domestic violence and sexual assault services. A lot of the people that we come into contact with through our programs, it may be a cultural norm that you don't report those kinds of things. You could be outed from your entire community, wherever your native country is, by reporting that your husband is abusing you, because in some cultures, unfortunately, the husband can treat you however he wants to, and you're considered his piece of property. And so part of our work with that population is just educating them on, you don't have to live that way. And so again, that makes them be available to be productive members of the community if they are not living in fear, and if they're able to get help and support and find new connections, because it's possible that when they're done with our services, they can't go back to their home community. They might have to relocate. They might have to develop a new support system. And so that's a big piece of what we're doing as well. We do a lot of work with students, and we work with students in all age groups around healthy relationships. And so allowing them to grow up in lives where they can recognize, oh my gosh, this is not a great relationship for me to be in, or my friend is in a relationship that she or he shouldn't be in, and helping that so that they can live in safe and healthy lives. And so it really has big impacts on the community that you may not see from a large scale. Obviously, working to eliminate racism and being involved in declaring that as a public health crisis in the city of Cincinnati, that has a big community impact. That has a sort of a big headline to it, maybe. But, the work that we do with individuals on a daily basis makes a big impact in their lives, so that they can also then be a stronger part of the community.
I would just add to that, like I said, for us, we're big on advocacy. So just being able to advocate for the kids in our programs, but also the kids being able to advocate for themselves. And so like a lot of our kids, they're saying by having that a mentor, that adult presence outside of family members, that they're having that voice. So rather it's being a voice of being able to speak up when they're in a home, if they feel like they need something from their parent or their guardian, or if it's something, maybe at work. Like we had one kid who wasn't getting enough work hours at work. And then I didn't understand that, based on her other coworkers and their hours, but being able to get those skills from her mentor, and then being able to say that in a polite manner, like, hey, I noticed, I'm not getting as many work hours as them. Why is that? And what can we do to resolve that issue? So we do a lot of that, like building that self-esteem and that self-confidence with the kids in our program. And then to Jennifer's point, I think like it does make that bigger impact in the community, because then because they have that self-confidence in them, then they're going to take that to a whole nother level, whether it is addressing the police brutality or just the other different social injustices that are going on in our city and in our nation.
Very good. Thank you all for sharing. Next, would a few of you be willing to speak to maybe some of the challenges facing work related to equality and social justice?
I can tell you that one of our biggest challenges is probably funding. Finding ways to support the programming that we're doing. And it can be very challenging, particularly our work with the people that do harm. People are willing to donate money to things that support, the children or our domestic violence victims. But what we can't always get them to understand is that, well, if we could address this piece of it first, this part wouldn't be as big over here, but they hear that, oh, you work with those kind of people, and they're like, no, we don't want to fund that. And so that is definitely a big challenge. Obviously, the racial justice issue is a challenge that has existed even before the 150 years that the YWCA locally has been working on it. That's over 400 years of concern going on there. But I think for us, it's just being able to find that support. We have staff that are dedicated and they are passionate about the work that we do. And it sometimes is just a matter of convincing people what impact it can have. What difference is it going to make in your life if you donate to this program or this, organization. And so that is definitely a challenge. And I think the political climate always for our work, it makes a big difference. Who's the president of the United States? That makes a difference. Who are the local senators and congressmen? And we advocate with the Ohio Domestic Violence Network for domestic violence funding. We're getting ready to do that in a couple of weeks here, because depending on who's in those seats that makes those decisions about how much funding goes to the Violence Against Women Act or how much funding goes to victims of crime, makes big impact, not only here in Cincinnati, but across the state. And so we have to make sure that we are actively involved in that. And unfortunately, it's not a static system. It changes. People have different opinions and they are able to have those. And just depending on who's driving the bus makes all the world of difference for us.
Yeah, and I think, definitely the political environment and anti-immigrant sentiment that, has basically increased hate crimes against immigrants and nationally, I think. I think a future challenge that we're going to see in the coming years is with the new president raising the ceiling on refugee resettlement in the US. It was at a historic low. So a lot of refugee resettlement agencies closed their doors because they were not getting the funding they needed, or the people being resettled here. And so it's a positive that our new president is raising that to a historic high of 125,000 entrants. However, we don't have the structure in place anymore to support them. So I think that the existing refugee resettlement agencies are really going to be overloaded and beyond capacity to be able to serve all these new refugees that are going to be entering our country. And so we have to rebuild that refugee resettlement program. And I think that's going to be a challenge. And then I also feel like COVID-19 has really affected the communities that I am working with. They are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So in Cincinnati alone, this was, in the middle of the pandemic. So last fall, 50% or a little over 50% of all new COVID cases were coming from the Hispanic community. And there wasn't really any advocacy around educating and making sure that families understood everything that was happening around COVID and health and safety guidelines in their native language. That was part of the issue. They were getting all this misinformation because they use social media to get a lot of their news, and especially with the refugee community, WhatsApp is really popular. And so it was really easy for people to prey on them and to provide misinformation to them. And then you have families who are living in multi-generation households. They're considered essential workers, but they weren't given the proper PPE at work. And so they're already at a high risk of contracting COVID. And then not being able to get that information in their native language. We would have families that would say, well, it's over because I go out in public and nobody's wearing a mask. So they're, it must be okay now. But, we know that it wasn't. And so I think that has been a huge challenge, and a challenge that we're trying to address and advocate for right now is instilling confidence in this community to getting a vaccine. Because there is a lot of hesitancy within certain refugee communities. They will not get the vaccine. They don't trust it. They've been given so much misinformation about it. And we're trying to, we've been trying for months to proactively address this in a way that will help the community feel better about getting the vaccine. So I think COVID has definitely affected the community.
I would add to that, community partnerships can be a challenge, because we work with a lot of African-American youth, but also a lot of the kids in our program, they have mental health going on. And so there's that stigma around that, right? So I think there's that lack of education when it comes to mental health, because a lot of it is mental health can stem from being in poverty or witnessing violence, whether it's domestic violence or anything like that. So I think when we're talking to potential volunteers or organizations about our work, when we give them a little bit of information of where our kids come from, it's like, oh, I want to help, but wait a minute, what's going on with them? And so I think that's a big challenge for us, is sometimes getting the people and the community organizations to volunteer with us, because of they hear certain words or phrases and then it just kind of like, nah, we're not interested. But they're not realizing that sometimes it's just having that additional support in this child's life. That's all that matters. A lot of times, like what some of the behaviors that the kids are displaying is they're not going to do that with you. They're only doing it in that environment. So if I'm at home and it's chaotic, then I'm going to act up at home because it's chaotic. But if I have a trusted adult that's at school or at the rec center, then I respect them so much that I'm not going to, behave that particular way.
Well, thank you all for those responses. That's great. I think the last question I'll ask is, if we have students who are listening and they're interested in getting involved in equality and social justice work, what advice would you give them? How can they get involved in this kind of work and make a difference?
I can start. I mean, I think the biggest thing that you have to remember if you're going into any sort of equality, diversity, justice, any field like that, and then especially looking additionally, which most of these organizations are in the nonprofit sector, is that nonprofit work is about servant leadership, and it is about serving first, and then your other priorities come second. You're in your position to serve your mission day in and day out. And sometimes in nonprofit, that is very sticky, and sometimes in nonprofit that is very, very sticky. And so it's just a lot of hard work and being kind of on that quote grind for your mission every single day. We're in our jobs to fight for our cause, fight for whoever our client base is, and fight for whatever the future is for our organization every day. So I think that's just something to remember is, when you come into these roles, these causes, these nonprofits, you are here to serve. And so you kind of have to align your priorities, align what you are looking for in life personally and professionally. But sometimes putting these on a side, not necessarily a back burner, just a side burner of, it's tough, and you have to be ready to put your nose down and get to work and maybe see a little negative results before you see positive results, and there's always something to fight for. I just think that especially listening to all of you lovely women today, it's, we already know this, but we're not close to a lot of people's end goals. And I think that's still a ways away. And so it's always going to be a fight for your mission. So you just have to be ready to work very, very hard and to not get discouraged, and to keep pushing.
Yeah, and I think to go along with that, I had a grad school social work professor tell me one time, it's not enough to just be well-intentioned, because well-intentioned people can also cause harm to communities. And so I think it's really important that you educate yourself about your cause, and that you don't other the people that you're supporting, or that you don't take credit for their success, because it's not about you, and it's not about, the way that I approach my work is I don't do my work to make myself feel better or to feel like I'm saving somebody, because I'm not here to do that. And, refugees don't need to be saved. They're so resilient, and they've been through more in their short lives than I will probably ever experience in my lifetime. So it is not my job to save them. It's my job to advocate for them and to help lift up their voices so that they can be strong leaders for their communities. So I think that, sometimes people get a nonprofit work because it's so feel good and, I'm really making a difference. But if it's the way that you approach your work, I think, that makes it meaningful. And that really can create positive changes for your community.
I think one thing that's important about thinking about getting in, particularly equality and social justice work, is you have to have your own support system and your own set of self-care, because there's a lot of secondary trauma that comes to people who work in these environments, and we all work with difficult populations, and we're all passionate about working for the populations that we work for and looking for intersections with other organizations. All three of these other agencies on here today, our work could connect with any one of them. But you can't do that work if you're not taking care of yourselves too. And so I think in thinking about that is being okay with taking care of yourself along the way, because you can't help lift up the voices of all these other people that you're trying to help and advocate for if you're not also able to take care of yourself in the process.
And I would just add in one of the ways to for the student to figure out what it is and what capacity they want to serve, just always doing some research, seeing what organizations are out there. So if you're big on poverty, then seeing what nonprofits in the city focus on that, and then just connecting that way. And also I would just possibly, I would add, I forgot what I was going to add, I'm sorry. My phone just went out. But I would say maybe get a mentor, someone that's older, that's in the nonprofit field, and that can be able to help you figure out what it is that you're interested in. But definitely, if anyone is like ever interested as a student, they have this passion, they want to start something, I would say look to see what's out there, because there's so many I didn't know, I'm going to do this bulk training, and I didn't know there was like over 10,000 nonprofits in Cincinnati. And I was like, wait a minute, what? That's a lot. And so a lot of it is like, you don't need to create something new. It's just partnering alongside someone who's already doing the work. So I would suggest just doing a couple of those.
And jumping off Latisha, I'm a bold graduate, and so, but shadow, go volunteer, go set up just a coffee chat with, it doesn't even have to be the executive director. It can be anybody in the organization. And sometimes it's great to get both sides of that, depending on what role you want. But any nonprofit will be, first off, very happy to spread their mission to anybody that wants to listen. But anybody in nonprofit will be happy to answer that email and to sit down and to talk with you and spend an hour out of their week to just answer any of your questions that you might have about their organization. And that, I think, is something that I wish I would have done before getting into nonprofit. Is just like Latisha said, there's so much out there. Go find and pick and choose, and even things that you think you might have zero interest in, go talk to some people and just get out there and see what's there.
Yes, awesome words from all of you. Thank you so much. I think this has been really good. Students who are listening, I hope that was helpful to you. Latisha, Kristin, Jennifer, Lindsay, thank you all so much for joining and for sharing your expertise. And students, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.